South Africa's Electoral Commission, the Independent Electoral Commission, has released the final results of the 2024 general election, showing that no party won a majority, while also announcing how the seats will be distributed in the 400-member National Assembly. The election has seen the governing ANC losing its fortunes, with the new MK party coming third after the DA, Democratic Alliance. Arise News politics editor Sumna Sambu reports this and more on the Post.
I present those results on the board for you.
The final results of the controversial 2024 South African general election being announced by the Independent Electoral Commission's chairperson, Mosotho Mopia. The governing African National Congress, ANC, scored 40.18% with 159 seats allocated to it, while the main opposition DA got 21.81% with 87 seats, and the new entrant MK party scoring 14.58% and receiving 58 seats. The EFF scored 9.52% and obtained 39 seats. This confirms that the ANC will have to go into a coalition to form the next government. But the MK is having none of that, claiming along with other smaller political parties that the election was rigged and the results should not have been released.
We are going to need the time. Nobody must declare tomorrow. If that happens, people will be provoking us.
The election has shaken the governing ANC, as several South Africans came out in their numbers, with the polls recording a 58.63% voters turnout. One Johannesburg-based women group, which monitored the election across the country, explains the polls, which had more women voters but lesser women candidates.
So we need to do much more in terms of women's political participation. I indicated we have 50% women in cabinet and 46% in our parliament, but that is because of the policy of the ANC. And other parties do not have that policy. So if the ANC is not in power, we will not see that kind of representation.
Some observer missions like Yaga Africa, which led a delegation from Nigeria, Egypt, Liberia and others to monitor the polls, explain the outcome.
The election has gone relatively well. From all the international observer mission, there is consensus that the people of South Africa need to be commended for their resilience, for their dedication and also their commitment towards electoral democracy. As you know, this election coincides with 30 years of democracy, but the resilience that they demonstrated in the face of logistical challenges is one that is what deserves commendation.
Other observer missions like that of the AU, led by former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, and the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, ISA, led by former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, say 9% of voting stations failed to open on time on election day, and that the presiding officers were not properly trained. They all agree that the failure of the Voters Management Device, or VDM, the poor publicity on the amendment of where voters can vote, and the introduction of independent candidates all affected the polls, but that the issues were not enough to mar the entire election.
People should be willing to accept results of the election, except they are very sure the results are manipulated. Not because you lost elections, so you said the results were wrong. What? Because how do you know people love you? There are cases where people leave their homes and go and vote, and even their wives don't vote for them. If no one party gathered enough votes to form a government, that means that there will be coalitions. To me, coalitions are good ways of running a country.
And while voters awaited the results outcome, the National Results Operations Center in Midrand was full to capacity, with party agents and journalists eager to have a view of the dashboard as results trickle in, with the electronic platform at times experiencing a glitch.
The results continue to trickle in, and almost everyone is waiting here. The political parties are all here with their desks, and several journalists are all right here waiting to see how the final results continue to trickle in.
An observer explains the tense atmosphere at the results center.
You could see the dashboard as the votes coming for each party. You can literally track that. Every political party has its own stand and they're following the results. I think it's really it's a good exercise so far, and hopefully Nigeria can also emulate this.
The new kid on the block, MK Party and its agents are also at the results center, basking in the euphoria of being triumphant, despite its opposition to the results released so far.
These people have just been too comfortable. The entrance of Mkhonto has now obviously thrown the cat amongst the pigeons. They know they can't be comfortable anymore. We're going to hold them accountable. We're going to be watching. We're going to be the third eye in the government structures, whether it be national, provincial, and even come 2026 for local government. So we are quite comfortable that what you're seeing there is obviously going to grow. It's obviously the smaller VDs that have been coming in.
The use of the special voting, diaspora voting, and introduction of independent candidates in the South African election is what some observers find as unique within the South African election system.
This special election is a new election which will favor a lot of people, including the youth people, the journalists who are having no time in the day of elections, those in the prisons, those in the hospitals, elderly persons, and those who are less privileged people. That day for election, that 2 days election is for them only. So I think this is a very good initiative to democracy in all the continent, not only South Africa.
Unlike Nigeria, in South Africa, there are independent auditors that audit, results that are already captured at the different provinces. They are audited independently, and then political parties and media have access, to those results at the same time that the Electoral Commission actually has.
We need change in South Africa. We need change. We need change. We need change. And it must come with MK.
As political parties work to build a coalition to form the next government in South Africa, the ANC, which has been in power since 1994, says its leader and the country's current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, would not step down, and that the issue is non-negotiable during coalition talks. Somna Sambo, Arise News, Johannesburg.
Joining us now on this show as we review the South African election is Ambassador Joe Keshi, Nigeria's former diplomat. Good morning, Ambassador Keshi, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning,
Ayo.
And good morning, Ayo. Thanks for. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Okay, we already have that detailed report from Somna Sambo, Arise political editor, on the elections in South Africa. Now, we just want your take on some of the highlights. Coalition politics, which is now the big issue. The ANC losing its majority in 30 years. In previous elections, ANC always got over 60%, 57.5% in the last election. Now the same ANC is down to 40%. 3, the influence of Jacob Zuma with the MK party, Mkhonto Wezinswe, taking the whole of KwaZulu-Natal and reducing the influence of the ANC. And then what comes next? Will Ramaphosa remain president? And then what lessons can we learn from what has happened in South Africa?
Thank you, Ruben. First, I really don't know why Sambo began by saying a controversial election. I do not see what was controversial about the election in South Africa. We have all focused on the buzz that ANC has lost its 30 years majority and its dominance of South African politics since the end of apartheid. But the truth is that in South Africa, I've been in South Africa in the last few months, quite a number of people expected that ANC was not going to do very well. I was in South Africa at the beginning of this year, and it was all over the place that South Africa might actually not do well. What people were not sure was exactly what would be the outcome of the election, vis-a-vis whether ANC would be able to remain in power as a dominant political party. So I think that for us in this part of the world, we should begin to look at the process and what has been achieved in South Africa. I was actually, it was interesting to me to see in spite of the little glitches here and there, to see the huge dashboard that was reporting the elections, right on time, and nobody interrupted, or it didn't just go permanently, off, and nobody could find out what happened. And it's because of this, what has happened in South Africa, this election, that again, I go back to what I've been trying to say for, since the beginning of this year, that look, we actually need to rethink, and I use the word, we need to rethink the apartheid system. We've been too focused on the obnoxious policy and ignored some of the things that the apartheid regime, left behind. And one of those things they left behind was a democratic foundation, which the people of South Africa, since since end of white minority rule, has actually maintained. And again, what has happened now has confirmed that foundation, the strength of that foundation. For those of us in Nigeria, for those who are campaigning for parliamentary system in Nigeria, this should give them some inspiration. Because I think in 1976 or 1977, when the military convened a constitutional conference in Nigeria, leading to the handover in 1979, Professor Billy Dudley proposed proportional representation, which is what South Africa, is using, and which is why quite a number, for the first time, 18 political parties will be in power. Will be in parliament, as against just one or two like we have in this country here today. So these are some of these things I think that we should focus on. Not necessarily that ANC lost its majority. Yes, it was expected that it would lose its majority as a result of a number of issues, which of course has to do with the fact that a number of people in South Africa believe that they've not bridged the gap between the rich and the poor. And interestingly enough, the blackouts, electricity, was a major issue in this campaign, and the fact that a number of people in South Africa do not think that ANC has done enough for them. So on a general level, I think there's a lot of lessons that we in this part of the world, we need to learn from what's going on in South Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now going on to what's next, or the conversations that will happen in the next 2 weeks before Parliament comes back or sits again. There have been talks around coalition, whether it be a coalition of national unity or a government of national unity or a coalition government. And when you talk about both things, you then wonder who would the ANC be willing to come into partnership with? The DA, the newly formed MK, who have said that as long as Cyril Ramaphosa is the presidential candidate, there would be no alliance. And on the other hand, ANC have said he's the man we're going for. Maybe the question I should ask, is it a wise move for them to hold on to Cyril Ramaphosa, despite the fact that there might be an opportunity for a coalition with MK, only that their condition is that he must not be the person on the ballot?
Ayo, I think they have barely 14 days to sort out this problem. And 14 days is quite a short time because, if I'm not mistaken, the parliament is going to be inaugurated in about 14 days, if I'm right.
Yes, you're right.
And,
they have
a speaker with
maximum 30 days. Legally, maximum 30 days. Well, in 14 days, they're supposed to be inaugurated, yes.
But yes, a speaker will be elected, and of course, a president will be elected. Look, Ayo, what you are hearing now from all the political parties is their starting negotiating position. Everybody is putting on table where they are started from. When they begin to talk, when the reality dawns on them, I think, you know, they're all just going to make some shifts, you know. But you can realize the position of Zuma and his political party. Look, this is a time to not just to ask for a pound of flesh, but also to ask for blood itself, you know, to come with that pound of flesh. But at the same time, ANC still has an advantage, and they can actually choose a partner they want to work with if they can at least cross the 50% threshold or, you know, something like that. So what you are hearing now from all the political parties is their starting negotiating position. But what I found very interesting, it's not really about who becomes president and so on. A number of the smaller parties are saying that they're actually going into parliament to ensure that they hold the government accountable. And that's the most important thing, to ensure that they hold the government accountable. Some are even threatening that if the president is retained, they are going to bring him back and reopen his, the corruption case against him, the money that was found in his farm, and that he'll be brought to parliament to answer more questions on that issue. And I think that's what parliament is supposed to do, hold the government accountable for his policies, for his actions, and the rest of it. So that, for me, is the most interesting thing. A number of parties are making it very clear that they are going to parliament to ensure that they hold the government accountable. When you hold the government accountable, it helps the government itself to be reasonable, to be rational, and oftentimes to do the right thing because of the fear of losing the next election. To a large extent, ANC over the years has been so lackadaisical on a number of issues. They've tried to maintain the foundation that I spoke of, you know, at the start of this program. But I'm not too sure that they listened well enough to the concerns of the people and that they did the best they can to address some of the concerns of the voters. And the result of not listening enough, the result of not addressing the concerns of voters is what you have seen in this election. And you know, of course, look, 30 years is enough. You know, it's quite a time for a party to become very complacent, you know, and to think that it can always win every election. But from the last election to now, ANC has actually been gradually losing ground. And if they do not find a better way, even if they retain even if they retain the presidency, they need to do more. They need to do a lot more to be able to win a majority in the next election.
Our dear ANC, the party set up by Priestley Isakasema, the party of Chief Herbert Lutili, Nelson Mandela, as we speak today, is no longer reality in South Africa. The things that destroyed ANC are the things that destroyed our own national politicians here. Number one is corruption. The ANC became an albatross to the things it preached against. Two, not understanding the times, like the sons of Issachar. That's another problem. Do you think in going into any coalition, ANC will learn their lesson? Another scenario is, do you think it's just best for Cyril Ramaphosa to go? Because apparently, if you allow Cyril get into a coalition with the DA, for instance, obviously he can't go into a coalition with MK. What's it called? Jacob Zuma's party. And neither can he go into a coalition with EFF because they are very diametrically opposed in philosophy. And even when the likes of Butulisi's party, IFP, is saying, we too, we are here with their 3%, you know nothing will happen. Do you just think it's just best for Cyril Ramaphosa to step aside? Because the problem here is not the ANC. The problem, fair and square, is Cyril Ramaphosa.
Absolutely. I agree with you, Rufai. And it brings me to the point that was made to me by a taxi driver a couple of years ago. I was actually in South Africa when the plot to remove Mbeki, was being hatched by some members of the ANC. And I was in this taxi, and I asked the taxi driver that I can't understand why they are interested in removing the president at that time, Mbeki, and replacing him with a Zuma. And the taxi driver was pointedly said to me, look, Mbeki, good for the economy. Zuma, good for the people. And that whole idea of good for the people is what has put ANC in trouble. You're absolutely right. Corruption has been the basis and the cause of the dissatisfaction of the people of South Africa against the ANC. But as I said, look, 30 years in power, uninterrupted. For goodness sake, it's enough for a party to become very complacent, as you have seen also in this, in this part of the world. And so at the end of the day, I agree with you. I have actually thought about it. And I said, look, it might actually be good for the ANC to consider allowing the current president to go and have a rest or go back to his business, and to his friends in the private sector. And bring in a new fresh hand who probably would understand the needs of the people and the needs of South Africa. Because at the end of the day, look, part of the problem of the continent, and I go back to what I saw all the time, part of the problem of the continent all over the place is leadership. The inability of the leadership of most of these countries to understand the real problems and to address the real problems concerning the people. But South African voters have sent a message to the politicians that they need to change their ways. And I want to believe that the outcome when the negotiations start will probably be a lesson to future leaders of South Africa that, look, if they continue to do the wrong thing, the voters would also react. But what should concern us in this part of the world is how do we create that democratic, foundation that the people themselves will stop listening to politicians and their palliatives all the time when there's an election, and then continue to vote the way they've been voting. And after voting, they start crying that, life is challenging. You were told before the election that even after the election, life would be challenging. And now you are crying, but because you did not do the right thing. But the South Africans have made their decision. It is now left to the leaders to find a way to ensure that the democratic foundation which they inherited is kept going and that they can improve upon it for the sake of the country itself.
Okay, Ambassador Keshi, beyond the personalities, where did the ANC get it wrong? To such an extent, the Democratic Alliance that is holding sway now in the Orange Free State and elsewhere, scoring up to 22% and having quite a substantial number of seats. Center-right party interested in free trade, liberalism and all that. Where did the ANC get it wrong after 30 years? Post-Mandela, there's a book that talks about South Africa after Mandela. So we are now faced with that reality of South Africa after Mandela. The MK says they will not agree with the ANC to form a coalition with their 14% after the collation of results, with their 58 seats to ANC's 158 seats. Zuma says Ramaphosa has to go. EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, they have just 9%, so they are out. ANC cannot go there. The Democratic Alliance, ANC cannot agree on the dispute over black empowerment and health insurance. So what options are left for the ANC right now? Would Ramaphosa and other members of the ANC have to go back to Zuma and lick their vomit? And I asked you earlier, what lessons can we learn from all of this in terms of political calculations and all of that? That's why I asked, where did the ANC get it wrong? Look,
I think from the beginning, there's there is a clear difference between when you have a personality like the late, Mandela, as regards the people, that came after him. And that difference is very, very clear, because in the case of Mandela, he towered above everybody. And for the sacrifice he made for South Africa, the people respected him. And no matter whether he achieved or he did not achieve, he was revered as a leader of the struggle. And that was helpful during, when Mandela was in office. But subsequently after that, the others that came, they don't have that kind of personality, they don't have that kind of courage or reputation. And so it's a question of comparing the mighty gods and the small gods, where the small gods do not have the courage of the bigger, of the Almighty, and consequently, that began to affect the party. But by and large, as Rufai pointed out, the greatest mistake ANC made was on the issue of corruption. When they became a party associated with corruption, they began right from Zuma's side to lose the people. And the trial of Zuma itself has really not helped. Because immediately Zuma formed the party, all the supporters moved over, to him. And this created, the crisis you've seen today that is affecting ANC. So the absence of a leader with that charisma, with the ability to hold the party together, has been missing since the end of Mandela's, time. And the consequence of that is what you are seeing. But more especially the fact that some of the aspirations of the South Africans post-apartheid has not been achieved. And that, again, is the crucial issue, that the politicians fail to listen to the yearnings of the people. But at the end of the day, I have no confidence in my mind that when the chiefs are down and the politicians are around the negotiating table, they would all act in the best interest of South Africa. Now, whether that would include the current president or whether he has to go, I'm confident that they will find a way out. If they have to sacrifice Ramaphosa, yes, it can be sacrificed. It can be sacrificed. Nobody is indispensable. Let's get that clear. Nobody is indispensable. He can be sacrificed if ANC wants to remain in office. But the truth of the matter is that as the leading political party with the highest number, they now have to choose their bride. And they have to look at people they have to work with. If at the end of the day, they have to go for the ugly bride, they certainly will do that. And as you rightly pointed out, they will swallow their vomit and go and negotiate and find redemption for Zuma, which is exactly what I believe will probably happen at the end of the day.
All right. Just a question. You talk about corruption being the bane of the ANCC, which, like you rightly pointed out. But then the chunk of people who make up MK today came from the ANC. And the leader of MK himself was ousted based on corruption charges. In fact, they say that the corruption bedeviling the ANC today also was part of his administration. So are the people really looking for an alternative to what exists currently, or looking for a party without corruption? Because Zuma himself, who leads the MK, has been convicted on corruption charges. So what are the people really looking for? And then finally, my question would be, what has bedeviled the NCC in terms of complacency, a good movement turned into a party hijacked by business associates, personal interest, is prevalent across the African continent. The number of good movements, great leaders who have started and along the line, falling along the way. How can this be prevented? What is the solution to this?
When I was in Namibia and we were helping SWAPO, The late president, who just died at the beginning of this year, was the head of the team negotiating with the African group, as well as negotiating with the UN. And at every meeting that, we attended with them, we shared views with them about development, about politics in Africa, and the rest of them. And this gentleman who became president, who just died, was fond of saying something, which I always remember. He used to say to us, yeah, we accept all the advice. We recognize all the comments. We've seen developments in Africa, but we are going to do the best. That's his words. We are going to do the best and avoid the mistakes a number of African countries has made post-independence. Today, the fact that Namibia is doing so well, and they have had a seamless run since independence in 1991, is as a result of that mindset that they've learned some lessons from observing independent African states and the mistakes they've made. And they were determined to avoid those mistakes. So from Samuyoma, you have seen a stream of, presidents come and go in Namibia, for example, but it has not affected the popularity of the party itself. Yes, South Africa is larger, but the point I'm trying to make is that this is exactly the lesson the ANC failed to learn, number one. And number two, the fact that they did not and they continue to fail to listen to the voices and to the concerns of the people. When politicians continue to fail to listen to the voice of the people and to their yearnings and to their desire, but feast themselves to high heaven, this is the consequence of what we are seeing in South Africa and elsewhere.
Okay, sir. I think all the things that are happening today was already written. For further reading, you can read Frank Coggan's book.
Absolutely.
Frank Coggan wrote a book in 2014, The Time Traveler's Guide to South Africa in 2030. It's of the International Race Research Institute. He had written about everything that is happening today. The question I'd like to ask is this. Do you think, in the words of Frantz Fanon, oppressed people oppress others? ANC now became the oppressors that once fought against oppression.
I would answer, I don't know. I have quoted Frantz Fanon a lot on your program, but I'll answer your question with this. I can't remember precisely from who, just unlike you and Ruben, you are very good in remembering all the books you've read. But I believe that, I don't know whether it was in Chinua Achebe, when I was Chinua Achebe's book, that they use a house, the author used a house as a metaphor for the independence struggle. And it was said that when they got to the door of the house, after they have, and they believe they've captured that it was going to be independence, the leaders said to the people, it is not good for all of us to go into the house. Let us go in and see first. And when we go in and see, we come and bring you, the rest of you, in. And the story went on to say, the leaders went in. Since then, the leaders have been in and the people have been out. That's exactly what is happening till today.
No longer
so you're right. I agree.
No longer Achebe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that's exactly what is happening. The people are still outside and the leaders are inside. And that's the point I've been making. That they continue to fail to respond to the yearnings of the people. The people who voted for them. When it comes to election, they come up with palliatives. And by the way, I think I said it on your program before, we should stop palliatives in this country. It's a source of corruption, deep corruption. And it's also fueling prices in the marketplace. So this is the problem, and this is my answer to your question.
Thank you so much.
You are absolutely right. The leaders are inside, and the people are outside. And so if the people, and Frantz Fanon said it very well, the oppressors on assumption of office, in fact, becomes the new oppressors. The only difference is the previous ones were white and the new ones are black.
Simple.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Very enlightening conversation this morning. We look forward to what will happen in the next few days, especially when Parliament is inaugurated in South Africa.